It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. A beautiful spring wedding, the perfect cake, friends and family gathered to celebrate. But just as the bride and groom raised the knife to cut the cake, a canine police dog lunged, growling, barking and refusing to let go. Within moments, smiles turned to shock, and what was meant to be a celebration became a crime scene. What the dog uncovered inside that wedding cake will leave you stunned. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The sun shone brightly over the quiet town of Meadow Spring, where a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming wildflowers. It was one of those rare spring afternoons when everything felt just right. The trees stood tall in the background. The sky stretched wide and blue, and laughter filled the open field behind the white wood chapel. Today was the day Jonas Reed and Marina Ellis were getting married. The ceremony had ended not long ago, and now guests wandered around the beautifully decorated reception area. Wooden chairs, white cloth-covered tables, and soft string lights gave the space a cozy and romantic charm. A tall, three-tiered cake stood proudly at the center on a round table. It was decorated with soft swirls of white frosting and delicate pink and cream roses. Jonas stood near the cake, dressed in a sharp cream tuxedo with black lapels, his short hair neatly combed and his eyes constantly scanning the area. It was just habit. As a local police officer, Jonas had trained himself to stay alert, always. But today, he tried to let go of that instinct. Today he was a groom, not a cop. By his side sat his loyal canine partner Coda, a strong and intelligent Belgian Malinois. Coda had been by Jonas's side for nearly 5 years. Together they had tracked suspects, found missing people, and stopped more than a few dangerous crimes. Everyone in town knew Coda. And today, even though he was off duty, he wore his police vest as a proud symbol of his service, and, maybe to keep him from feeling left out, Marina, glowing in her lace wedding gown, moved beside Jonas and smiled. Her dark brown hair flowed in soft waves over her shoulders and her eyes sparkled with emotion. The two of them had been together for 7 years, through thick and thin. Their friends often said they were opposites that just fit. Jonas was calm and steady while Marina was warm and full of energy. Guests gathered closer as it was time to cut the cake. Phones came out. Laughter echoed. Music faded. Everyone was ready for the sweet, traditional moment. "Here we go," Jonas said, picking up the silver cake knife. Marina placed her hand gently over his. Together they moved toward the cake as the crowd counted down, smiling and clapping. 3, 2. That's when Coda growled, low and deep. His ears perked. His body stiffened. "Coda?" Jonas glanced down, confused. Before he could do anything, Coda lunged forward. With a sharp bark that stopped everyone in their tracks, the dog sprang up, paws hitting the edge of the cake table. He didn't bite or attack, but his nose moved fast and low, circling the bottom tier of the cake with laser focus. Gasps came from the crowd. The photographer's camera lowered. The laughter stopped. Marina's smile disappeared. "Jonas? What's he doing?" Jonas grabbed Coda's leash gently. "Easy, buddy. It's okay." But Coda didn't calm down. His nose stayed glued to one spot. He let out another bark, louder this time. It wasn't play. It was a signal. Jonas had seen that signal before, many times. It was how Coda behaved during searches when he found something dangerous. One of the off-duty officers at the wedding, Chief Valen Troy, stepped forward. Valen had been Jonas's first partner when he joined the force. Older now, with graying hair and sharp eyes, Valen didn't hesitate. "Everyone take a step back," he said calmly but firmly. People obeyed without argument. A few looked around nervously. A couple of children were pulled closer to their parents. Valen reached into his suit jacket and pulled on a pair of latex gloves he always seemed to have tucked away. Slowly, he approached the cake while Coda stood stiff at attention, his gaze locked on one small area near the cake's base. With careful hands, Valen tilted the bottom layer slightly and examined the cardboard it rested on. There, hidden under a thin flap, He found something strange. It was a small plastic pouch tightly sealed, wrapped in wax paper. Clearly not a decoration. Valen unwrapped it just enough to look inside. His eyes widened slightly. He turned to Jonas. "It's a narcotic, possibly fentanyl. We'll need to test to confirm." A chill ran through the guests like a cold wind. Someone whispered, Is that dangerous?" Valen nodded. "Very. A small amount can be deadly." Marina stared at the cake, then back at Jonas. How did that get in there?" Jonas didn't answer right away. His mind was already racing. The cake had been picked up from Delaney's bakery, a well-known spot in town. Rosa Delaney had baked wedding cakes for decades. No one would suspect her, and Jonas himself had picked up the cake the day before. Everything had seemed fine, but now he wasn't sure. Marina's hand tightened on his arm. She was shaking, slightly. "Jonas," she whispered, "what if someone was trying to hurt us?" Jonas looked at her, trying to hide the doubt rising in his heart, but something in her voice, in her expression, made him pause. She wasn't just scared. She looked worried. And not just about the guests. As officers started quietly securing the area, Jonas knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It had just become a crime scene, and his canine partner might have just saved someone's life. The wedding reception looked nothing like it had just an hour ago. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. Officers moved quickly but quietly around the backyard, speaking into radios and putting up yellow tape around the cake table. Guests stood in small clusters, whispering to one another. Some were still in shock. Others looked around nervously, waiting to be told what was going on. Jonas Reed stood with his arms crossed, still wearing his wedding tuxedo. The same tuxedo that now felt completely out of place. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the area like he was back on duty. Coda sat beside him, still alert. His ears perked up and his eyes locked on the cake table. He hadn't moved much since finding the plastic pouch. Jonas gave him a quick scratch behind the ear. "Good boy," he murmured. "Real good." Chief Valen Troy approached from the other side of the lawn, holding a clipboard. "We've got more questions than answers, Jonas," he said. "That was definitely fentanyl in the package. Lab confirmed it in minutes. If that thing had leaked, we could have had people getting sick. Or worse." Jonas clenched his jaw. Who would do something like this at a wedding? Valen didn't answer right away. "Someone who knew no one would expect it," he said finally. "Someone who had access." They both turned to look at the cake. It was still mostly intact, though a section of the bottom tier had been lifted during the investigation. Officers had taken photos, dusted for prints, and were now interviewing. The catering staff. The baker, Rosa Delaney, had been brought to the scene. She stood near one of the officers, her hands shaking and her eyes wide with disbelief. "I made that cake myself," she said, her voice trembling. "I baked it yesterday morning and decorated it by hand. Nothing about it was strange. I wrapped it, boxed it. Jonas, you picked it up yourself." Jonas nodded slowly. "I remember." Nothing felt off. "But someone must have tampered with it after that," Rosa said. "Please, I've been doing this for 23 years. I would never put anyone in danger." Jonas believed her. Or at least he wanted to. Rosa had baked cakes for half the weddings in town, including birthdays and graduation parties. Her shop was spotless, her record clean, but something still didn't add up. Nearby, Officer Danny Levin was speaking to the catering crew. One of the younger staff members, a nervous-looking man in his early 20s named Liam Peters, raised his hand. I think the cake might have been left alone for a little bit," he said. "When we got here, it was delivered early. I helped move it to the garage next to the kitchen. It sat there for maybe, 30 to 40 minutes. We were still setting up the tables outside." Jonas turned sharply. "Alone? No one watching it?" Liam shrugged. "I didn't think anything of it. It was just a cake. I didn't even open the box. That 30-minute gap was more than enough. Someone could have slipped in and hidden the drugs if they knew what they were doing." And that's when Jonas remembered something. 2 days before the wedding, Marina had argued with him about the cake pickup. She had insisted that it be brought in earlier than originally planned, even though it meant storing it longer without refrigeration. Jonas had brushed it off as normal wedding stress. Marina had been worried about details, timing, decorations. Everyone had said it was typical pre-wedding nerves. But now, it didn't feel typical. Jonas found Marina near the barn, speaking to her cousin and two friends. Her smile had faded hours ago. She looked tired and uneasy. He walked over. "Can we talk for a second?" She nodded, following him a few steps away from the others. "I have to ask," he said quietly. "Why were you so set on picking the cake? Up early? You fought me hard on that." Marina looked confused for a second, then her face changed just slightly. She lowered her eyes. I wanted everything perfect. You know that. I thought we'd need more time to set up." Jonas didn't say anything, he just watched her. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she added. "It probably wasn't," Jonas said. "But right now every little detail matters. Someone put fentanyl in our wedding cake, and they had to know where and when to do it." Marina looked pale. She wrapped her arms around herself and took a step back. "Do you think someone was trying to hurt us?" "I don't know," Jonas said, "but I need to find out." She hesitated, then reached into her clutch and pulled out a small folded note. "I found this in the dressing room this morning," she said, handing it to him. "I didn't think it meant anything." Jonas opened it. It was a torn slip of paper with the letters DR scribbled in one corner. Below it was a partial phone number. It wasn't much, but it was something. He looked back at her. "If you remember anything else, anything strange, tell me. Right away." Marina nodded quickly. "Of course." But Jonas couldn't shake the feeling in his chest. Something wasn't right. Marina was nervous, yes, but there was something else. Something she wasn't saying. He tucked the note into his pocket and turned back toward the officers. Behind him, Coda stood watching the cake table again, his body tense. And for the first time since the ceremony began, Jonas didn't feel like a groom anymore. He felt like a man chasing a truth he didn't want to find. The sun had begun to dip behind the treetops, casting long shadows over the fields of Meadow Spring. What should have been a night of dancing and celebration was now a full-scale investigation. The wedding guests were no longer mingling and laughing. They were waiting, watching, and whispering in hushed tones. Some had been taken aside for questioning. Others stayed seated, unsure if they were allowed to leave. Jonas Reed stood near the edge of the property with his canine partner, Coda, who had not relaxed since the incident at the cake table. The Belgian, Malinois, paced slowly, his head low, sniffing the air. His behavior told Jonas what his gut already suspected. Something was still wrong. An officer approached from the catering team. Her name was Danny Levin, and she looked concerned. "One of the servers just said something strange," she told Jonas. "She said she saw someone near the woods just before the ceremony, a man in a hoodie standing close to the tree line. She thought he was part of the staff, but now she's not so sure." Jonas frowned. "Did she get a look at his face?" "No," Danny said. "She said he walked away as soon as she turned toward him. Thought maybe he was taking a phone call or just needed some air." Jonas nodded. "Thanks. Let the others know I'm going to check it out." He clicked his tongue softly and patted his leg. "Let's go, Coda." The dog trotted to his side, alert and ready. Jonas didn't tell Marina. He didn't say anything, to Valen or the other officers either. He just walked toward the woods, following the trail Coda seemed eager to take. The further they walked, the quieter everything became. The sounds of the wedding faded behind them. No music, no voices, just the wind through the trees and the steady crunch of dry leaves under their feet. About 20 yards in, Coda stopped. His body went rigid. He sniffed the air, let out a sharp bark, and turned sharply to the left. Jonas followed, hand reaching instinctively toward his side. Though he remembered, no badge, no weapon, just him, his dog, and his training. A moment. Later, he saw movement behind a low pile of branches near a fallen log. Someone was crouched there, barely visible through the brush. "Don't move," Jonas called out. "Stand up slowly, hands where I can see them." The figure froze. Then, slowly, a man rose from the ground, young, pale, and shaking. He looked tired, nervous, and worn down. Jonas recognized him immediately. Devin Ellis, Marina's younger brother. The one she barely spoke about. The one who hadn't been invited to the wedding. Jonas stepped forward, keeping Coda close. "Devin, what are you doing out here?" Devin raised his hands, his voice cracking. "I'm not armed, I swear. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for what?" Jonas asked, his voice calm but firm. I owed people money. A lot of money," Devin said, his hands trembling. "They told me I could pay it back if I did one thing. Just one thing. Hide something in the cake. They said no one would get hurt. You hid fentanyl in a wedding cake," Jonas said, barely believing the words coming from his own mouth. "I didn't know what it was at first," Devin said quickly. "I thought it was money or something else. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know." Jonas stared at him. "So you were here the whole time? Watching?" Devin nodded slowly. "They told me someone would come to pick it up. I just had to make sure it was still there when they arrived. But then your dog, he found it, and now everything's falling apart." A twig snapped behind them. Jonas spun around. Coda growled deep and sharp. Out of the shadows, a second figure appeared. This one was older, taller, dressed in all black. He walked calmly, not trying to hide. His hands were at his sides, one holding a phone, the other suspiciously close to his jacket. "Looks like someone couldn't follow instructions," the man said quietly. "This was supposed to be simple." Jonas stepped in front of Devin. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He smiled slightly. "You're the groom, and a cop. That's a shame." He reached into his jacket, and Jonas saw the handle of a small pistol. Coda leapt. The dog's powerful body slammed into the man's arm just as he raised the gun. The weapon fired, but the shot went wide, hitting a tree. Jonas lunged forward and tackled the man to the ground. The phone flew, the gun slid into the dirt, and the forest turned into chaos for a moment. Then it was over. Coda stood over the man, teeth bared. Jonas knelt beside him, breathing hard. The man's face was bruised, but he was smiling. "You think I'm the only one?" he said, blood on his lip. Jonas stared at him. "This wasn't just about your wedding," the man whispered. "It was a test, a distraction. While you were cutting cake, someone else was moving something big right under your nose." Jonas stood slowly, heart pounding. Somewhere back at the wedding, something else was still happening, and it might already be too late. Jonas Reed stood over the man in black, chest rising and falling with each deep breath. His wedding suit was torn and streaked with dirt. Sweat ran down his face. Coda, the canine police dog, stood beside him, muscles tense, keeping watch over the subdued attacker. The man had said something Jonas couldn't ignore. It was a distraction. Something bigger is moving while you're focused on this. Jonas didn't know what something bigger meant, but the weight of those words sank deep. If this cake incident was only a piece of the puzzle, then the rest of it was still out there, and it might already be in motion. He grabbed his radio, which had finally been reattached by Chief Valen before Jonas went into the woods. He pressed the button hard. "This is Officer Jonas Reed. I need immediate lockdown at the reception site. Nobody leaves. Repeat, nobody leaves. We have a second operation in play." "Copy that," came the voice from the other end. "Lockdown is being initiated now." Jonas turned to Devin Ellis, who sat slumped against a tree nearby, handcuffed and silent. He hadn't said a word since the fight. His face was pale, eyes wide. Whether it was guilt, fear, or both, Jonas couldn't tell. "Coda," Jonas said, nodding toward the path. The dog took the lead. They made their way back through the trees. As they stepped out of the forest, the scene had completely changed. Patrol cars now blocked both exits to the venue. Guests were gathered in organized groups, looking worried and confused. Some officers were sweeping the property, checking vehicles, equipment, and even food containers. Marina stood near the barn, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her wedding dress was wrinkled and stained with grass. Her veil was gone. When she saw Jonas, her face tightened. She didn't move. She just watched him with a look he couldn't read. Sergeant Valen met him halfway, clipboard in hand, voice low. "We've got something." A neighbor's security camera picked up a second van pulling in around 10:15 a.m. Wasn't listed on any rental or delivery forms. No license plates either. "We think it might have been a drop vehicle." Jonas felt his heart skip. "That was before most guests arrived," he said. "Exactly," Valen replied. "The cake was delivered at 9:30. If that van brought anything else, we missed it." Jonas scanned the yard. Something still didn't sit right. Then Coda barked. The dog sprinted toward the far end of the property, stopping near the catering van. He scratched at the side door, barking sharply and digging his paws into the grass. Jonas and two other officers ran to catch up. "Open it!" Jonas shouted. They yanked the door open. Inside were trays of leftover food, drink dispensers, and a large blue cooler. It was heavy, sealed and locked with a simple latch. Sergeant Valen pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, layered under thick blocks of ice, were dozens of tightly packed, vacuum-sealed pouches. Fentanyl. Not just one or two packets. Enough to poison thousands. Jonas stared at it, stunned. His entire body went cold. They had almost missed it. If Coda hadn't alerted again, they never would have found it. Behind him, Marina stepped closer. Her voice was low and shaky. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear, Jonas, I didn't know it went this far." He turned to face her. She looked broken, her makeup faded, her shoulders shaking. "I believed Devin when he said it was just a favor," she added. "I thought he needed to pass a note or money. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to ruin the day." Jonas didn't answer right away. He stared at her for a long moment. "You should have told me," he finally said. "I could have helped. But instead you let our wedding be used to move dangerous drugs." Marina nodded slowly. "I didn't just lose my brother today," she whispered. "I think I lost you too." Jonas didn't know what to say. Part of him still loved her. But another part didn't know if he could trust her again. Officers moved in behind him to collect the cooler and the rest of the evidence. Everything was photographed, tagged, and loaded into unmarked vans. Devin was taken into custody without resistance. The man in black had already been transported to a holding facility. As the last of the guests were finally released, Jonas stood at the edge of the lawn, looking out at the fading sun. Coda sat beside him, silent and watchful. Chief Valen joined him after a while. "You did good, son," he said quietly. "You saved a lot of lives today." Jonas didn't answer at first. His hands were in his pockets. His wedding ring still felt too heavy. "I never thought my wedding would turn into a raid," he said almost to himself. Valen chuckled softly. "Life's funny that way. The good days test us more than the bad ones sometimes." Jonas looked down at Coda. He knew. Long before any of us. He always knows. He gave the dog a gentle scratch behind the ears. Coda leaned into him, eyes soft. As the last patrol car pulled away, Jonas was left standing in the quiet field that had once been filled with joy. The flowers were still there. The light still hung above the tables. But the magic of the day was gone. And yet, somewhere in that brokenness, there was a strange kind of peace. Jonas hadn't chosen this path, but he had walked it, and he had done the right thing. Not all happy endings come with music and cake. Some come with truth, and sometimes that's enough.